Yesterday, the Reserve Bank issued a very short statement saying that Cyril Ramaphosa had not contravened exchange control regulations, neither Ramaphosa nor his entity Intaba and Yoni Estates, and said they were able to find this because no perfected transition had happened. What that means is, because the Sudanese business person, Hassim Mustafa, who was the source of the foreign currency, never picked up his buffalo, or never had some trucks arrive at Ntabanyoni to pick up his buffalo and deliver them for, I presume, sea freighting back to Sudan, that there was no concluded transaction, and therefore there was no obligation on Cyril Ramaphosa to declare those dollars as is generally required by the rules governing foreign exchange. I'm really struggling with this. Karam Singh is the Executive Director of Corruption Watch. Karam, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, John. Nice to be on your program.
Do you understand this?
I suppose I struggle, as you and the general public, to understand it, but it would seem like a kind of a technicality in terms of the reading of the relevant legislation, in terms of this notion of entitlement, and then the entitlement to the funds triggering the reporting requirement. But it does seem like a loophole, and it does, short of the Reserve Bank giving us a fuller statement in terms of how they understand their law and their processes, it leaves more questions than answers, really.
Yeah, and it's a bit like the Lady R report. We're told that it finds that nothing other than food and general supplies were loaded onto the Lady R in the middle of the night in Simonstown in December. And we're told now everything's fine because no perfected transaction happens. And no, you can't know any more than that. Trust us. I'm sorry, we don't trust you. So unless you tell us more, unless you explain in language of ABC, we are going to continue to think that there is a cover-up. Maybe we'll still think so if you do give us the full explanation. But maybe if you give us the full explanation, we might go, oh, okay, now I get it.
Yeah, well, I mean, this is the problem with having, these kind of a secrecy clauses in legislation, or the no obligation to publish or disclose. We can understand in the course of a complex police investigation that we might not see the files, which lead the police to decide not to recommend a prosecution. But when you're dealing with a specialized regulator on a technical matter like this, to cloak this thing now in secrecy and make anybody that wants to see this investigative report go through some kind of a legal review process, seems in tension with a kind of open and transparent democracy that we'd want to have, and certainly in the context of the first citizen, the president, where the president would be seeking to remove any cloud of doubt over his integrity in the matter, one would want to see exactly how the SARB, got to this conclusion and what they actually investigated and the reasoning behind their conclusion, because their very terse statement just doesn't give us that.
Because as I understand the law, if I somebody comes up to me in the street and says, you look like you're a man of means, which I don't, but anyway, let's presume for the sake of this example that I look like a man of means. My father's just died and I'm trying to sell his gold coins because I'm in desperate need of money. And I go, okay, well, I'll take some of them off your hands, and I hand over a certain amount of money. And then it turns out that those gold coins are stolen. It's no excuse, I'm guilty. And so this man brings dollars into the country. The Reserve Bank has told us that there is no record of him declaring those dollars, which makes it seem that those dollars are in the country illegally. Then they move into under the control of the president, and then they're stolen and he's spotless. It can't be.
No. And I mean, it could be, John, and it could be. I mean, it could be legally, not the fact that there was never any declaration. So, I mean, if there's conflicting stories now about whether he this forex was declared when he came into the country. But if it wasn't,
he says he did. Mr. Mustafa said he did, but the Reserve Bank has said officially that they have no record of it.
Exactly. So, the question is, what is really the legal position? Is it so easy to bring forex into the country in this way, for it to come into somebody's possession, a politically exposed person, and because an underlying transaction which is related to the money is incomplete, then there's no obligation? Would that would then exist in perpetuity, that lack of obligation? I mean, certainly these are the kinds of challenges we have around our anti-money laundering regime, which got us, blacklisted or graylisted by FATF in the first place. Maybe we need much stricter rules around these things, particularly when we're dealing with physical foreign exchange. I mean, if I receive forex from my bank, immediately there's an obligation. I've got to give the bank an explanation as to why that money came into my account. Now, this is a slightly different scenario because there's no intermediary in terms of a bank. Certainly, we should have a much stronger regime in place, which makes it an absolute obligation to report, regardless of the underlying transaction.
Yeah, I occasionally get money in foreign currency into my account, like you, and I have to declare the reason why that money is coming in. I have 30 days to convert it. I can convert it immediately, or I can make a bet that the exchange rate is going to move in my favor, and I can say, no, don't cash it in yet, but I have 30 days to do it. The money arrived at Ntabanyoni, according to the story, on the 25th of December, and it was stolen on the 8th of February, which is 8 plus 31 equals 39, plus another 6 days, which is 45 days, which is 15 days beyond the legal limit to declare currency in one's possession. And all of a sudden, the president seems exempt from that because of a non-perfected transaction.
Isn't this how money laundering works? Isn't this, we saw the Gold Mafia documentary on Al Jazeera, which talks about how money gets moved around, allegedly related to other kinds of transactions. And in many cases, those underlying transactions, which are meant to be linked to the money, don't actually exist, and it's just a pretext for moving money from one account to the other. So this would seem like a huge loophole in our law, that somebody can just say, well, that I received the money for a particular purpose, but the underlying transaction didn't happen, so therefore there's no obligation. When would the obligation get triggered? As soon as I decide I want to spend that money? If I decide to spend that money, then am I then acknowledging that I've got a right to the money? I mean, it seems very muddy.
Yeah, and the Reserve Bank Governor, thanks, Karam Singh, Executive Director, Corruption Watch. The Reserve Bank Governor, Lesotho Kganyago, is due to brief Parliament on the 30th of this month, and I'm sure he will be under a lot of pressure to say more than he has said so far. On President Ramaphosa and the Buffalo dollars, Mike says from Komiki, and I am presuming that this Mike from Komiki is a Mike I know who is a very experienced and senior lawyer. John, as I understand it, CR is not yet illegally entitled to the dollars. They aren't actually his until the transaction has been completed by the delivery of the buffaloes to the buyer. As long as they haven't been delivered, the buyer could demand his money back. Therefore, Ramaphosa's obligation to declare the dollars arises only when the transaction has been completed. Okay, fair enough. That's the technicality explained, and explained in a way that even I can understand it. But it doesn't answer all of the questions about this whole process and how this man arrived and where the dollars were from and why they were hidden in furniture for 45 days before they were stolen. But I suppose the Reserve Bank is going to say that all of those questions are for either Ramaphosa himself or the Hawks or SARS, but SARS has said there are no tax implications for Cyril Ramaphosa here. So one by one, the organs of state are saying, no, and the public protector, no, everything's fine. And Ramaphosa is never going to take us into his confidence, is he? He's never going to say, my fellow South Africans, I'm here with the television on me and I'm surrounded by 10 of the country's most rabidly enthusiastic journalists who are going to question me for the next 3 hours about the Phala Phala matter. He's never going to do that, is he? So we're always going to be left with unanswered questions.
Afternoon Drive with John Maytham
on CapeTalk.